Hi, it's Katrina. With all of the great scientific knowledge known to humanity, the big questions still elude us, especially the question of where humans came from. Today, I'm going to explore some of the strangest theories about ancient civilizations and the universe itself, including simulations, Martian dust, and parallel universes. The video game. What would you do if you found out that life is nothing but a video game? A literal video game, a computer simulation, and you are a part of it. Could you go about your daily life knowing that someone was pushing your buttons? According to NASA scientist Rich Turilli, the universe itself could belong to a simulation created by programmers in the future. Not programmers from the past or clever aliens from a distant civilization. Rich thinks that if you and I are part of the simulation, we have future programmers to blame. Rich is exactly the kind of person who knows about this stuff. He's not a self-proclaimed expert on all things spooky and futuristic. Rich was the director of the Center for Evolutionary Computation and Automated Design at NASA in 2012. In an interview with Vice News, Rich said the unstoppable power of ever-growing computers means that video games of the future may be far more than what you're used to today. Forget about sitting down at your computer to control a 2D monster in a pre-constructed world on your screen. Games and computers could both be so advanced in the future that AI-controlled NPCs have human-level intelligence and even self-awareness. You, my friend, yes, you there, could be an NPC in an extremely boring version of an Earth video game. The whole universe could be part of a procedurally generated world in which players take control of human characters. So, what if the meaning of life was nothing but a programmer's code? It's an interesting thought, and one that I hope doesn't hurt your brain too much as you ponder it, but it only leads to more confusing points. Like, who created the programmers? Are the programmers inside a universe created by even smarter futuristic programmers? It's an endless cycle of questions without answers. And now, with so much happening with AI, we might be headed in that direction. Secrets of Antarctica. There is a map from the 18th century that's unlike any map you've ever seen before. That is, unless you've already seen the Gouache map. But for those of you who haven't, this map is an anomaly in the world of science. It shows Antarctica completely dry of ice, yet the dating makes no sense. It was drawn in the 1700s when Antarctica was a frozen continent with temperatures so cold you could freeze your fingers off. The Gouache map was drawn by none other than legendary French geographer Philippe Gouache de la Neuville around the year 1739. At the time, new discoveries were being made south of the Cape of Good Hope, which is the bottom tip of Africa. European powers wanted to learn more about the mysterious lands at the bottom of the world. Philippe worked as a cartographer. In fact, he earned himself a position as the official geographer of the king. It sounds like a very prestigious job, and it was. Imagine being the king's personal mapmaker. Philippe produced his maps by collecting knowledge and research from explorers and astronomers. He didn't necessarily go in search of lands himself, though. Instead, he searched through old records and paid attention to the newest discoveries, which helped him make his best maps. Philippe was the first one who figured out the existence of Alaska and the Bering Strait, even though he never saw them with his own eyes. All the French cartographer's maps make perfect sense, except for the one I'm here to tell you about today. It appears to accurately depict the subglacial topography of Antarctica. And by subglacial, I mean underneath the ice. Philippe made a map of what Antarctica looks like without any ice. This was something that was only done recently by scientists using space-age technology. Unfortunately, I'm not a necromancer. I can't raise Philippe from the grave to ask him how he drew such an incredible map. There is no logical explanation other than that Philippe must have found an older map depicting a dry Antarctica. He then used the older map as inspiration for his own map in 1739. One theory is that there was an advanced civilization living in Antarctica thousands of years ago, and the Europeans knew about it, or at least a handful of scholars did. However, mainstream science says that there is no way this could be true, since Antarctica has been frozen solid for tens of thousands of years. If there was a civilization in Antarctica that knew the secrets of humanity's origins, they have been gone for a very, very long time. The Genesis answer. In a world where computers are so smart that they can create entire universes, computers become gods. But if you believe in creationism, computers being gods just isn't a possibility. Creationists believe that nothing existed in the universe before God. There was no Big Bang, there was only the Creator. But how much do you really know about creationists? And did you know that there are two different kinds? Old Earth creationists believe that the planet is 4.5 billion years old, with the universe itself being an old geezer at 14 billion years old. Young Earth creationists, however, believe that every single thing in existence has only been around for 6,000 years. If you've been paying attention to the channel, you'll know I'm talking about discoveries that are tens of thousands of years old all the time. Plus, don't forget the dinosaur-related discoveries that are millions of years old. So, what's the formula to date Earth at 6,000 years? It's surprisingly simple. Creationists believe that the age of the planet is detailed in the Bible. 6 days after creation, Adam was born. The Bible says that between Adam and Abraham, there were 2,000 years. And since Abraham lived in the year 2000 BC, God's creation of the planet can be dated to 4000 BC. That makes our beautiful world roughly 6,024 years old. Young Earth creationism is gaining a lot of traction, especially in the United States of America. Henry Madison Morris began the Creation Research Society to put a scientific spin on the old belief. A survey in 2017 found that 38% of adults in the US believe that God created humans within the last 10,000 years. The same question asked in 2019 saw 40% of adults agree, suggesting that believers are on the rise. Before we move on, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Curtis Head for giving us the super thanks. This channel wouldn't be what it is without supporters like you. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button because it really helps us out. Now let's get back to it. Carbonic acid and panspermia. Scientists have discovered evidence that human beings were born from space dust. This is proof that the theory of panspermia, something that's been ridiculed mercilessly, is more than likely. It's totally possible. Imagine for a second that there is a gigantic dandelion millions of light years away in the universe. The dandelion holds the seeds of life. Then, suddenly, a wind blows through the hollow vastness of space. And just like when you blow on a dandelion flower in a meadow, the seeds are dispersed. The tiny seeds of life scatter through the infinite universe. A few of them drift into the Milky Way, where they get caught in Earth's gravitational field and enter the atmosphere. The seeds, after traveling so far, land in the soil and begin to grow roots. Those roots, over time, then turn into humans. That was a bit more than a second of imagination, but I hope you got the picture I was trying to paint for you. This is the theory of panspermia. Many scientists argue that life originated in space, though obviously not in a giant flower. Instead, the seeds of life came from comets, meteorites, gas clouds, and chunks of spatial ice. Not actual human seeds, but the chemicals necessary to begin life. Small molecules that, when introduced to the perfect habitable climate of Earth, slowly evolved into human beings. It's about the farthest you can get from creationism. I promised proof, and don't worry, I'm going to deliver it. Floating in the middle of our galaxy is a gas cloud. It's a pretty chilly cloud at minus 280 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside the swirling nebula of gas is a molecule that's extremely important for all living organisms. Scientists at the Spanish Astrobiology Center in Madrid just identified the molecule for the first time, and it's called carbonic acid. The discovery has caused the theory of panspermia to go from fringe science to something scientists are forced to consider as a very real possibility. Carbonic acid is the precursor to amino acids. Amino acids are the basic building blocks of all proteins. Carbonic acid is necessary for humans to breathe. It moves carbon dioxide from our blood into our lungs, which is then exhaled into the atmosphere. Carbonic acid also works to keep the geological processes on Earth working. Without it, life would simply cease to exist. The discovery of carbonic acid floating in a cloud of space gas proves that the building blocks for life are brewing out there in the universe. So you, me, and every other living thing could all just be products of space dust. How does that make you feel? I kind of like it. Our Neanderthal uncles. Scientists can't seem to figure out the relationship between our ancient human ancestors and our beloved extinct friends, the Neanderthals. At first, scientists didn't think the two species ever met each other, but then it became clear that Neanderthals and humans did meet. Scientists figured out that they were smooching under the primordial stars. Pretty romantic for a bunch of big four-headed cave folks. And by smooching, I mean that they were creating human-Neanderthal hybrid babies. Now, though, the science is changing again. The previous theory was that Homo sapiens mingled with Neanderthals when the two species met in Eurasia 75,000 years ago. But new evidence has been found that suggests humans were already breeding with Neanderthals 250,000 years ago. It's another piece of the human puzzle that doesn't seem to fit. The new discovery was made by a group of geneticists who studied Neanderthal DNA. They looked deep into the Neanderthal genome, using examples from 250,000-year-old remains. Imagine their shock when they discovered that 6% of the Neanderthal genome was inherited from early modern humans. And if that sounds weird to you, it's because it is weird. What I'm trying to say is that Neanderthals already had almost 10% of their DNA inherited from human beings. This means that they must have been getting it on under those stars and in caves for thousands of years already. But how in the world did they meet? What were their interactions like? And why did they have such a huge chunk of human-inherited DNA? Scientists have little in the way of answers. The one thing they do know is that swapping DNA didn't prove to be particularly useful. In both humans and Neanderthals, the genetic material inherited from interbreeding got pushed way into the back of the genome. Think of the genetic material like the books in the school library that nobody wants to read, pushed way into the back corner and covered in dust. The genetic material became locked away, never to be used. Even right now, human beings have about 20% of the genetic heritage stored inside of us, like bloatware on your computer, just sitting in our genetic structure collecting dust. The zoo hypothesis. Do you remember your last visit to the zoo? Walking from exhibit to exhibit, looking at the animals, bored and restless in their cages? It wouldn't be a lot of fun to be stuck at the zoo, right? But what if you are in a zoo right now and you don't even know it? One of the theories of why scientists have never found aliens is going to shock you to your core. It could be as simple as aliens not wanting to be found. Aliens may have placed human beings on planet Earth to keep us inside a zoo, just like all the penguins at SeaWorld. The idea is called the zoo hypothesis, and it's fairly popular in the astronomical community. In 1973, astronomer John Ball from MIT suggested that higher life forms follow the Prime Directive from Star Trek. All you Trekkies out there know what I'm talking about. The Prime Directive means that the aliens can't interfere with less developed civilizations. John suggested that humans have never contacted aliens because, as much as it hurts all of our feelings, we just aren't worthy. Some scientists still support the zoo hypothesis today, and a lot of work has been put into provoking an alien encounter. In 2017, a Norwegian antenna beamed a message across the stars to a location 12 light-years away. It doesn't seem like much in the grand scope of the universe, but 12 light-years is extremely far. But still, with the message beamed to all potentially listening little green men, there was no contact. So, could humans really be living in a planet-sized zoo? It could explain why there are so many UFO sightings, but all they ever do is look at us from their spaceships. UFOs could be curious aliens coming to check out the Milky Way Zoological Society's display on planet Earth. It could be that for the aliens, you and I are nothing but penguins. According to the Sumerians, the ancient Sumerians had an incredible concept of where human beings came from. 6,500 years ago in Iraq, known then as Mesopotamia, the kingdom of Sumer flourished. They were the first truly advanced human society. At least the first ones that scientists are comfortable confirming right now. There could have been civilizations much earlier that were lost to history. The Sumerians came up with language, writing, art, astronomy, math, and so much more. They also had a complex religious system that viewed an unusual group of gods as the creators of human beings. Unlike in Christianity, where God created humans and let them run around like free-range chickens, the Sumerians believed that humans lived with the gods. Humans were made as servants because the gods were too lazy to do their own work. But were these actually gods? Or did the Sumerians know that they were slaves to a race of powerful aliens? In the ancient city of Nippur, archaeologists discovered the original Sumerian creation myth inscribed on clay tablets. This story is known as the Enuma Elish, and it was written thousands of years before the Old Testament. The text describes how the gods no longer wanted to toil, so they produced a race of subservient beings that would do their jobs for them. The gods used their own flesh and blood, mixed with a little genetic material from the soil, to create a sort of hybrid species, part god, part organic earthling. So, how does it feel knowing you might have the blood of gods flowing through your veins? Here's a little tidbit that you can use during your next theological debate. In the Enuma Elish, the first humans were created in a place called Eden. In the ancient Sumerian language, Eden means flat terrain. Eden was the garden of the gods located somewhere in Mesopotamia. Scholars believe that the Bible copied this exact story from the Sumerians. These lazy gods were the Anunnaki, and if you're a longtime viewer of this channel, I have no doubt that you've heard of them before. The Enuma Elish could be interpreted as the story of aliens coming to the planet and creating humans as miniature clones of themselves. If it's true, it means aliens jump-started civilization. Humans were still living in caves when the Anunnaki arrived on Earth. Through genetic modification, the Anunnaki single-handedly conceived civilization. But then, why did they abandon us? And where are they now? The last universal common ancestor. Life may have started on this planet more than once. When it comes to the origin of all life, a popular belief among geneticists is that all life on Earth came from a single common ancestor known as Luca. Luca stands for Last Universal Common Ancestor. The idea is that every tree, fish, human, and lizard can trace its origin to a very basic organism that emerged only once. It was the moment in which lightning was caught in a bottle, with all the ingredients coming together at just the right time and in just the right environment. In the blink of an eye, the first genetic life form on the planet was born, and from it came every other living thing. It was the seed that birthed the tree of life. From the tree's branches grew all the millions of species that have existed in the last 4 billion years or so. It's a theory that makes sense from a scientific standpoint, but it might not be 100% accurate. Paul Davies from Arizona State University thinks life may have evolved multiple times. Davies has suggested there could be more than one tree of life, even if the other trees are now extinct. What Paul is talking about are alternate forms of life. The current model for life on this planet is predictable. Animals utilize oxygen. They have organs, the ability to move, reproduce, and most of them have families and eyeballs. We are familiar with the types of animals we have on Earth, but Davies proposes that life forms originating from a different universal tree seed could exhibit vastly different characteristics. For example, instead of blood, maybe they had arsenic flowing through their veins. Maybe instead of breathing oxygen, land animals from an alternative tree breathe toxic gas. Davies thinks there could be evidence of these alternate life forms living in places like hydrothermal vents thousands of feet under the ocean. So what does this mean for the origin of humanity? It means that there could have been other intelligent species on the planet billions of years ago. Maybe a species that lived on Earth when it was covered in magma and the air was poison to breathe, at least for you and I. It also means that if true, any kind of creature could live and thrive on any planet. There could be animals living on distant moons where the temperature is so hot that a human would explode like a Hot Pocket in the microwave for too long. Davies' theory opens the doors to limitless forms of life in the universe. Isn't that amazing? Incoming superhumans. You and I have explored the ancient avenues of human evolution a lot today, but what about the future of human evolution? Could superpowered humans evolve over the next few decades, centuries, or millennia? The answer is a resounding yes. In fact, humans with extraordinary powers exist already. Have you ever heard the story of Vladimir Durov, an animal trainer who allegedly had a telepathic connection to animals? He was basically Dr. Dolittle, but in real life. If you could connect telepathically to your pets, what would you talk about? Maybe you do already. There are already technologies that can be used to create more evolutionarily evolved humans. The CRISPR system is being used right now to modify DNA strands, picking and choosing which traits a baby is born with. Scientists think that mutant genes could be identified and placed inside humans while in utero. This could theoretically provide powers of telekinesis, super strength, and maybe even super speed. But what about natural evolution? There is no set pathway that humans must go on. In time, we could evolve to breathe underwater. Would that be awesome, to swim with dolphins and dive with turtles? We could even grow wings at some point. There are no constraints in the world of evolution. Just take a look at whales. They used to walk on land, lumbering around on 4 legs. And now they're the biggest animals in the ocean. Evolution is surprising, to say the least. In 100,000 years, what do you think the human species will look like? Let me know in the comments below. The Martian equation. Isn't it strange how life can migrate over great distances? A bird eats a fruit, flies 1,000 miles, and drops a seed in an empty field. A seed from that fruit then grows in the empty field, creating a whole forest. Scientists think this might be how life on Earth took root. Not from a giant space bird, though that would be kind of cool, but rather from the seeds of life spreading from Mars to Earth. This theory is quite similar to Panspermia, but it's not identical. The idea is more contained in our cozy corner of existence. Research has shown that Earth, in its infancy, lacked the necessary ingredients to form life. If life is a soup, Earth didn't have any carrots or potatoes. The few ingredients Earth didn't have, Mars did. And as always, Mars acted as our friendly neighbor. According to National Geographic, scientist Stephen Benner discovered proof of 2 very important elements on the red planet. Stephen and his team found that billions of years ago on Mars, the element boron was present. This element is key in creating the building blocks of life. Let's call it the potato to our life soup. Stephen and his lab also found molybdenum, another key ingredient in life. Molybdenum can be our missing carrots. But how did potatoes and carrots from Mars get to Earth across the vastness of space to make the soup of life? It likely had something to do with a meteorite. Stephen and his team have theorized that a rock hit Mars, spraying debris at Earth. The transfer of elements resulted in all the ingredients finally being in the pot, and thus life on the planet was born. There is a less popular theory about Mars and Earth, but one I think you might find juicy. It's also possible that Mars was home to a highly advanced civilization that migrated to Earth. Take a look through a telescope at the Martian surface, and you'll clearly see that the planet is no longer habitable, but it probably used to be. Scientists have all but confirmed that liquid lakes and oceans once flowed across the planet's surface. Considering it had so many potatoes and carrots and also water, Mars could have been home to the original human civilization. Obviously, though, it didn't work out, as is evident by the thousands of miles of empty red dust. If the civilization had been advanced enough, maybe they understood their demise was imminent. Like Noah and his ark, they got on a spaceship and flew to Earth. But with the loss of their technology, they forgot their origins. They started living in caves, devolving instead of evolving. What if humans are only now reaching similar technological levels as our ancestors did on Mars generations ago? What are your thoughts on this theory? Let me know in the comments. The aquatic ape. In the early 1940s, German scientist Max Westenhofer became obsessed with the idea that humans came from the ocean. He noted certain characteristics that suggested an aquatic past. For example, the shedding of body hair and the potential regression of webbed fingers. Also the fact that we cry salty tears. But who needs all that body hair anyway? Max wasn't a big believer in evolution. He didn't think that humans were ever apes. Instead, he thought we were mer-people. I bet you didn't have humans evolving from mermaids on your bingo card for today. It's a theory that's been buried in recent years as scientists try to move away from it. but the aquatic ape theory is legit. Now I'm going to tell you exactly why humans may have originally lived under the sea. Max Westenhofer was written off as a lunatic fairly soon after he started talking about mermaids. Of course, I'm saying the word mermaid, but this was never the term used by Max. He wasn't that nuts to rave about mermaids. Biologist Alistair Hardy, who had similar ideas, was a little more discreet about his beliefs though. In the 1930s, Alistair Hardy began theorizing about the possibility of humans having aquatic ancestors, but he waited a long time to share his results. He became a respected academic and was even knighted for his contributions to the field of marine biology. Only when he reached the top of his profession did he surprise the world. At a speech in 1960, he announced his belief that humans likely evolved from aquatic apes. The idea spawned some sensational headlines in national newspapers, but the scientific community just ignored Hardy. He suddenly became the class outcast, not disgraced, but no longer very accepted. Rather than refute his claims, the scientific community just shrugged him off. How rude. Here is the theory in all of its glory. Hardy suggested that human ancestors lived along the coast at least 7 million years ago. They were only partially aquatic, living in coastal areas to harvest shellfish and seaweed. They were shallow water divers, able to hold their breath and swim like fish. The first Homo sapiens may have arisen from coastal environments long before they started roaming the African plains. Scientists won't even talk about this theory anymore, and I'm honestly not sure what it is about aquatic humans that freaks people out so much. Just take a look at the Bajau tribe, the modern version of aquatic humans. The Bajau are a seafaring group of nomads who live in Southeast Asia. They can hold their breath for over 5 minutes, which is longer than the most highly trained divers in the world. They've been hunting fish underwater as their primary food staple for at least a few thousand years. The Bajau are living, breathing examples of how humans could have evolved from a sort of ancient mermaid ape creature. So, why are we ignoring the facts? What's everyone so afraid of? The parallel universes. A microscopic singularity gave birth to everything in the observable universe 13.7 billion years ago. That event was the Big Bang. A thimble of energy exploded, inflating and expanding in all directions. Before a single second had passed, the universe was billions of times its original size. That expansion and inflation are still happening as the universe continues to develop. This is the accepted theory of how the universe was born. But is it your accepted theory? It certainly isn't a theory that everyone believes in. It doesn't even really make sense if you think about it. How can something come from nothing? What caused the Big Bang in the first place? What was there before the Big Bang? How could all of eternity have spawned from a formless void? How is existence even real? Oh no, I can feel an existential crisis coming on. So let's keep this train going before it derails. What I'm trying to tell you is that the universe could be even bigger than scientists say it is. The mysterious inflation and the Big Bang itself have convinced many researchers that there are parallel universes. Alexander Vilenkin is a theoretical physicist at Tufts University in Massachusetts. According to Alexander, the inflation that started with the Big Bang is continuing right now in corners of the universe that are too far to observe. It's known as eternal inflation, suggesting new galaxies are constantly being spawned. Alexander believes that things are even crazier than that. Instead of one Big Bang creating an endless universe with new solar systems, there could have been an infinite number of Big Bangs creating universes at the same time. Each universe is in its own bubble, pushing up against other bubble universes. Think of it like a never-ending roll of bubble wrap, with each bubble containing an infinite universe. Trying to imagine the scope of this is tough for the human brain. Nobody knows if it's true, as it's only a theory. For all we know, our universe could end past Pluto. We could be inside a contained cube in a reality that's too bizarre to comprehend. The stoned ape. Mushrooms are delicious. I think at least half the world can agree on that. But did you know that mushrooms may have been responsible for the evolution of the human brain? The mere fact that you're watching YouTube right now and using the internet could be thanks to an ape who ate a mushroom 2 million years ago. Welcome to the stoned ape theory, a hypothesis about as strange as it gets. This one's for all the psychedelic enthusiasts out there. According to Terence McKenna, the genius behind the development of the theory, magic mushrooms changed the brains of prehistoric proto-humans. Now take a seat while I explain just how it happened. An early ancestor of Homo sapiens was out for a leisurely stroll in the prehistoric world, likely in Africa. This was a very basic form of a human, more monkey than man. The creature probably didn't walk upright, instead hobbling around on its knuckles like a gorilla. Used to foraging and harvesting, the ape came across a mushroom. The mushroom looked tasty, so the ape-like creature stuffed the fungus into its mouth. What happened next is something people have described as transcendent. The proto-human experienced a mind-altering vision induced by the psychedelic mushroom. When the trip was over, the ape was profoundly changed. It felt invigorated, wiser, and a little less like a primitive animal. The ape told its friends about the magical mushrooms. More and more apes started going on hallucinogenic journeys by eating the fungus they stumbled upon. Within a couple million years, the human brain had tripled in size. The fantastic fungi had fundamentally altered the brain. It led to ancient humans developing speech, abstract thinking, and self-realization. In other words, human cognition. It's an awesome theory that could explain how humans became so smart. But is it true? Scientists have identified 23 different species of primates that added mushrooms to their diets during their evolutionary processes. Charles Grobe from UCLA said that indigenous cultures have a history with mushroom medicine, which they likely learned from their prehistoric ancestors. It isn't confirmed, but neither are any of the theories I've told you about today. Maybe apes ate mushrooms and became enlightened. Maybe less than brilliant Stone Age humans were genetically altered by aliens. Maybe we are the devolved remnants of a Martian species. These are all awesome theories, and I really enjoy telling you about them, but not a single one has been 100% proven by science. The singularity. I talked a little bit about the future of humanity and what evolution might bring our way, but what about the end of the line? What's the last step in humanity's journey? Many of the greatest minds believe that the human race is heading towards something called the singularity. In the early 2000s, Ray Kurzweil predicted that the singularity would happen by 2045. The singularity is when computers overtake the human brain, rendering humanity obsolete. This will result in a sudden and drastic change. Humans could be replaced by artificial intelligence or cyborgs. Humans could also be absorbed by technology, becoming a mix of machine and biological brains that science fiction hasn't even dreamed of. There are many believers in the imminent singularity. In the world of theoretical science, anything is possible. It could be that alien civilizations have already reached the singularity and morphed into a sort of Borg-like society. They might know that humans are around, but have no interest, because the cyborg aliens are living in space stations, draining energy from stars. Or, whatever cyborg aliens like to do in their spare time. Thanks for watching! Which theory was your favorite?
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Ancient Sumerians and Pluto. The ancient Sumerian civilization went extinct around 5,500 years ago, but during their great reign, they made some of the most impressive advancements of any ancient society. They had advanced laws that included jury systems, schools, practiced mathematics, and most interesting of all, they mastered astronomy. The Sumerians came thousands of years before the Greeks or the Romans, yet they seem to have had even more knowledge about the cosmos than the advanced societies that developed long after them. The Sumerians had a name for every planet. They knew about Mercury and Venus, they were aware of Mars and Jupiter, they even believed that there was once a planet called Tiamat that exploded and turned into the asteroid belt. They knew about Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and even Pluto. In fact, they called Pluto Gaga. Here is the reason that this is so shocking. Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto were not discovered until after the 1700s by modern telescopes. And since no evidence has ever been found that any civilization prior to 400 years ago figured out how to make such powerful telescopes, it makes no sense that the Sumerians knew about Pluto. They would have literally had no way to view it with their eyes. This strange fact has led to lots of speculation. Some say the Sumerians did indeed create telescopes so advanced they could see deep into the stars. Others say they gained their knowledge of the solar system by communicating with alien visitors who came down from the heavens. What do you think was the source of this incredibly advanced knowledge? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your theories. Manufacturing twine. Scientists have discovered the very tool that people from the Stone Age used to manufacture twine, like rope. And while twine might not be as exciting as potential aliens or mysterious early knowledge of Pluto, it was still a huge leap forward and a massive technological development. The tool comes in the form of a mammoth tusk. It was carved 40,000 years ago by an ancient human ancestor in order to create primitive rope. The tusk was discovered with 4 holes drilled in it, lined up perfectly, and marked with spiral incisions. Researchers were originally unsure what the instrument was used for when it was found in Germany. They theorized it could be part of a musical instrument or an object used for religious ceremonies. But scientists have finally figured out how our ancestors used it to weave plant fibers through its holes, twisting and manipulating until they had made rope and twine. The 4 holes of the instrument were used to keep plant fibers in place. By weaving them together, they created ropes for fishing nets, bows, and snares and traps. These strong fibers could even be used to create clothing and pull heavy objects. Keep in mind, this was almost 50,000 years ago, making it one of the first great technological inventions in human history. The oldest sunglasses. On the remote Baffin Island in Canada, a place rarely seen by many because it's so far in the frozen north, something amazing has been found. Researchers discovered what they believe could be the oldest pair of sunglasses in the world. They were fashioned by the Arctic Inuit to keep the snow glare out of their eyes while moving across the frigid wasteland. These sunglasses may not be too stylish by our modern standards, but they were certainly useful 2,000 years ago. They were created from a single piece of ivory, made to fit the face snugly with thin slits to see through. The glasses protected the wearer from snow blindness during the bright spring sunlight that reflected off the ice and snow. Without these glasses, just walking around was like staring directly at the sun. The Inuit who left these glasses behind were from the unique Thule culture. Researchers believe they traveled from the coast of Alaska all the way to the deep Canadian wilderness around the year 1200. And while many different types of sunglasses, or snow goggles, were made by the ancient people of the north, this particular pair seems to be the oldest. Other snow goggles were built from leather, while others were made from wood. It didn't really matter as long as they protected the user from going blind in the snow. The first gold. We're always talking about gold artifacts from ancient Egypt, Rome, and the civilizations of South America, but one of the biggest mysteries for archaeologists is trying to figure out where gold was first used as a precious metal and why. The oldest date anyone has for the discovery of gold is in 2600 BC in ancient Mesopotamia. Researchers believe these were the first people to create gold jewelry. Just over 1,000 years later, in the year 1223 BC, precious gold was used in the construction of Tutankhamun's tomb. But researchers continue trying to learn why people in Mesopotamia suddenly found gold so important. Sure, it's shiny and now it looks valuable, but it's crazy to think somebody dug it out of the ground and said, hey, that would make a great necklace. Either way, the oldest traces of gold being used in jewelry date back about 4,700 years ago, and the fad has never died. The first gold coins were manufactured in 700 BC, and that was really the birth of money. In 564 BC, the Lydian king Croesus established the first international gold currency. It was around this time that gold was being excavated all throughout the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern regions. Aristotle was philosophizing about gold, mines were being made at every gold vein, and everyone on Earth was scrambling to get their hands on the precious yellow material. Prehistoric New York. Archaeologists in Israel have discovered the original New York City. Mind you, it's nowhere near modern New York City. It's all the way on the other side of the planet. Researchers say the ruins of the city represent a metropolis once home to over 6,000 people. There were ritual temples, fortifications, planned roads, and neighborhoods. It dates back 5,000 years, though something even older was found beneath it. Underneath the ruins of the city, Israeli archaeologists found traces of an earlier settlement from 2,000 years prior. Excavation directors called it the Early Bronze Age New York. The founding of the city dramatically changed urbanization. Before this, People were just kind of living in primitive settlements of maybe a few dozen. But somewhere along the way, humans began concentrating in this one spot. It turned into a city over 160 acres, double the size of anything else in the region. There's almost nothing left of the megacity now, just ruins, scraps of pottery, burned animal bones from sacrifices, and broken statues. There were around 4 million fragments of artifacts found in total, with some of them even coming all the way from Egypt. This has led archaeologists to speculate that ancient New York may have been so impressive it drew settlers from faraway kingdoms. Who knew that 5,000 years ago people could be so organized? Ancient Egyptian magic medicine. The ancient Egyptians were some of the first people to discover how to heal the sick using medicine. 5,000 years ago as well, they were the ones who started the concept of a healthy life. Some of the earliest records of medical practitioners come from ancient Egypt, and yet this society was unique in that they discovered how to use herbs for practical, natural medicine, while also employing their own breed of magic that probably didn't do much to heal anybody. Here's the thing about the ancient Egyptians. They believed gods and demons as well as spirits were behind diseases. They thought that spirits went into a person's body and affected the way it functioned. To get rid of these pesky spirits, medical doctors would use a combination of spiritual prayers and natural remedies. Back then, doctors were usually priests. But before the Egyptian civilization collapsed, they had in fact separated what were essentially spiritual healers from real medical practitioners. They were so good at what they did that people came from other empires just to get help from Egyptian doctors. There is a document which contains over 700 remedies and formulas. It was written by an Egyptian doctor in 1500 BC, called the Ebers Papyrus. The document details how doctors discovered that the heart is the supply of blood to the body, attached to vessels in every corner. They also described the characteristics of mental illness, how to use birth control, how to fix dental issues, and even how to surgically remove an abscess and a tumor. A dream of atoms. Akarya Kannada was born somewhere around the year 600 BC in eastern India. He was a natural scientist, a philosopher, and something of a genius. According to Indian legend, he came up with the theory of atoms 2,500 years before John Dalton's official discovery. He was the very first person to suggest that everything in the universe was made up of tiny atoms that are invisible to the human eye. The idea occurred to him one day as he was breaking a piece of bread into small pieces. At some point, he realized that he was unable to divide the food into smaller fragments. He had already broken the bread up into very tiny crumbs and started wondering at what point did something like a piece of bread become so small that it could no longer be divided. This became the idea of the particle, the smallest piece of matter that is indivisible. Of course, he had no way to prove his theory. All he could do was think about these tiny particles, so small the human eye can't see them. His reasoning behind his theory was that if you could break up a piece of bread into crumbs, those crumbs must break up into something that humans don't have the capacity to see. And he was right, but humans didn't collectively agree with him for another 2.5 millennia. Pretty incredible, right? Despite not having access to the scientific instruments to prove his theories, this sage was thinking on a micro-scientific level. The Greek discovery of mermaids. The history of mainstream mermaids has been traced back to ancient Greece. I don't need to bother you with the details of what a mermaid is, but some of the earliest tales of mermaids come from Greek stories of dangerous monsters that were half woman, half bird. They lived on rocky crags on sea coasts and sang beautifully to seduce sailors. Sailors would become so enamored by the siren song that they steered their ships into the rocks and crashed. But these weren't actually the very first mermaid tales. The earliest known stories come from Assyria in 1000 BC. The Assyrians believed in a mermaid goddess named Atargatis. She accidentally killed her lover and jumped into a lake in shame, forever taking the form of a fish. But because she was so beautiful, she only became a fish from the waist down. She had a fish's tail and the beautiful upper body of a woman. So what does all this have to do with ancient discoveries? There are some who speculate that mermaids were once real, or at least some bizarre facsimile of mermaids. The coincidental telling of mermaid stories from Assyria to Greece and beyond suggests something fishy may have been seen by sailors. Even Roman historians, specifically Pliny the Elder, described mermaid sightings in the Mediterranean. So either the Assyrians were the first people to physically witness a real mermaid, or they were the first to come up with these stories of fish and human hybrids. Babylonian ghosts. A Babylonian tablet from 3,500 years ago could contain the very first depiction of a ghost. The tablet was made in the year 1500 BC, give or take a few years. It depicts what appears to be a male ghost being brought back from the afterlife. This is according to British Museum curator Irving Finkel. If true, it could mean that while the Assyrians invented mermaids, the Babylonians invented ghosts. The stories we still cherish today may have been some of the first stories ever told. Irving Finkel believes the tablet holds detailed instructions on how to exorcise a ghost. The directions explain how to transfer a spirit that's bothering you into an inanimate figurine. To get rid of a pesky ghost, simply make a figurine of the deceased man or a woman, prepare 2 vessels of beer, and call on the Mesopotamian god Shamash at sunrise. By saying the ritual words, the ghost will go into the figurine and leave you alone. The tablet also comes complete with a warning not to look behind you during the ritual, otherwise it won't work, and the ghost might get you instead. This is just one interpretation, and it hasn't been 100% verified. Irving believes the drawing was made by a master craftsman and kept in the library of an exorcist or in a temple to Shamash. But either way you look at it, this does seem to be the very first evidence of a human discovering a ghost, the discovery of gravity. A man named Ramesh Pokhriyal, who happens to be the Minister for Human Resource Development in India, says everything you know about Isaac Newton is a lie. He claims that an Indian mathematician discovered gravity hundreds of years before Sir Isaac Newton. It's not that Newton was a fraud, but that someone else had actually beat him to it. This bizarre accusation involves several different people. The first Indian scientist to discuss the effects of gravity was Brahmagupta in the 7th century. He wrote in a historical text that the body will always fall towards the earth because it's the nature of the earth to attract bodies. Years later, around the year 1120, Indian astronomer Bhaskara II elaborated on this idea, discussing how all things seem to be attracted to the surface of the earth. The issue here isn't exactly who discovered gravity first, but what the definition of a discovery is. Everyone who's ever been alive probably was aware that if you throw something in the air, it will come back down. This is general knowledge. Isaac Newton wasn't the first one to figure out that there was something keeping people from flying into space, but he was definitely the first one who was able to explain and spread his ideas in such a way that they became a common understanding. The lost city of the Kalahari. It was in 1885 when the Canadian explorer, entertainer, and inventor William Leonard Hunt documented a mysterious lost city deep in the Kalahari Desert. Also known as the Great Farini, all these years later, we still don't know what he actually found on that fateful expedition, or if he might have even made the whole thing up. Hunt is remembered as the first Westerner to cross the Kalahari Desert on foot and survive. When he returned to Europe, he described in a paper he presented to the Royal Geographical Society a ruined city of biblical proportions. He said he found a giant wreckage of stones, something that looked like a temple or a tomb, blocks sculpted from red sand, and evidence of a huge metropolis. However, Hunt said it was obvious the city had either been destroyed by an earthquake, a blast, or something equally as devastating. Whatever remained of the city after its destruction was washed away by the desert sands over thousands of years. Starting in 1932, there have been roughly 25 expeditions launched to find this mythical city. None of them have ever been successful. We don't know if there ever was a city in the desert or who could have possibly built it. It's not impossible, seeing as the Kalahari is a massive sandy desert 180 million years old. The shifting sands could easily bury an entire civilization, but to imagine people went into the desert and built the city is kind of hard to do. And the Great Farini had a wonderful imagination, so it's hard to tell if he actually did find a lost city or if it was part of his adventures and imagination. The lost city of Meroe. Meroe is located south of Aswan, just over the modern Egyptian border into the country of Sudan. Thousands of years ago, this was a major metropolis belonging to the ancient kingdom of Kush. The city was home to thousands of people and dotted by dozens of pyramids, unlike anything that's ever been built in Egypt. All that remains of the once great city are now the ruins of those pyramids, almost all of them broken in half, standing like shattered black obelisks against the brown wasteland of the deserts. It's hard to believe now that anybody lived in this place. But a lot of people did. The ancient city of Meroe was strategically built at a crossroad between many civilizations, where traders could stop, take a rest, and peddle their wares. This was around the year 1069 BC. It flourished up until the year 350 AD, when the Kushites were utterly decimated by the Aksumite Empire of Ethiopia. In terms of human civilization, this was a major chunk of time. If you want to compare it to somewhere like the United States, the city of Meroe prospered for over 1,000 years longer than the United States has even been around. By far, the most fascinating part of Meroe is its pyramids. To the Egyptians, these people were called the Nubians, and because of their close proximity, it's no surprise they were influenced by Egyptian culture. Likewise, the Egyptians were inspired by the Nubians. But rather than making enormous pyramids that could touch the sky, the Nubians went for the numbers. They built far more pyramids than the Egyptians could ever dream of, but they were much smaller and made of darker stone. Several still survive today, but are gradually fading with the rest of this forgotten place. The Khazar capital. Atil was once the capital of the Khazar Empire, but nobody knows where it is. It was occupied at least between the 8th century and the 10th century, and was somewhere in what is today Russia, but nobody has been able to find it. Some archaeologists don't even believe it's around anymore, as they say it was probably washed away when the Caspian Sea rose thousands of years ago. Excavations in 2003 by experts with the Astrakhan State University found ruins near the village of Samostelka in Russia containing artifacts from the Khazar, but they were unable to confirm the site as the location of Atil. But who were the Khazar anyway? The Khazar was a confederation of tribes that covered a huge section of European Russia starting in the 6th century. Nobody knows where exactly these people came from or much about their earlier history. However, we know they had contact with the Persians. They got some help from the Byzantine Emperor Heraclius in the early 600s, and they became an independent empire by the 7th century. Then, as the Arabs continued their northward expansion into the Caucasus in the middle of the 8th century, the Khazars were dragged into war. They were forced to abandon many of their cities. The fighting spread as far as Armenia, and then the Khazar were scattered to the winds. Ever since, their capital has been lost. The lost city of Z. Percy Fawcett was the great explorer who ventured into the jungles of the Amazon in search of a lost city and never returned. Depending on who you ask, Percy was either a brilliant adventurer or an incompetent lunatic. He's been described as both by people who knew him in the late 1800s. What we do know is that Percy was a territorial explorer, a man who went to places that had never been mapped with nothing but a machete and a compass. He met tribes, explored the world, and was even the inspiration behind Indiana Jones, allegedly. He spent 18 months on the frontier between Brazil and Bolivia in 1906, at which point he became convinced there was a lost civilization somewhere in the area. In 1912, he referred to this place as the Lost City of Z. In 1921, Percy and his team went out to find the city. They didn't get far, as most of his team became infected with diseases. They were besieged by wild animals, and they couldn't make it through the raw jungle. It was a total failure. In April of 1925, Percy set out on his final mission. He was joined by his oldest son, some Brazilians, and other researchers. He reached the unexplored territory in May of that same year, but we don't know what happened after that. 2 years passed and nobody heard a word from them. He was gone, and so was his team. 13 expeditions were launched to find out what happened to Percy, and over 100 people died without any success, all while trying to get through the jungle. We still don't know if the lost city of Z is even real. Underwater city in the Gulf of Mexico. An amateur archaeologist recently announced the unbelievable discovery of a lost city 12,000 years old. Let me start off by saying his discovery has not been touched remotely by any professional archaeologists. But his name is George Gill, and his supposed lost city includes a pyramid, and it's hiding off the coast of Louisiana. According to George, he has taken no less than 44 trips to the site where he says there are ruins. The location is near the Chandeleur Islands in the Gulf of Mexico, about 50 miles off the coast. He claims to have seen with his own eyes a pyramid structure in the center of a massive city built of granite. There are hundreds of buildings, all of them covered with sand and silt. The city was apparently built by people thousands of years ago who floated stones down the Mississippi River. They then assembled them off the coast near what is now New Orleans. This would have been 12,000 years ago, right around the time humans first entered North America. If this were true, this discovery would flip the world of archaeology on its head. But unfortunately, George doesn't have the proof he needs to change the history books. He claims the structures are down there, but no scientist has confirmed it yet, and George doesn't have any physical evidence. While he could be right, the scientific community would be genuinely shocked. The lost city of the Arabian Sands. There is supposedly a lost city called Ubar hiding underneath the sands of the Ramlat Shuyat in Dhofar. This is on the Arabian Peninsula. Legend has it the city was once rich in treasure, filled with beautiful gardens, and had walls of tall red stone. It was supposedly found by the Western explorer Bertram Thomas back in 1930, but it was in a horrible state of disrepair. Several missions were led after by Thomas, but nobody has ever been able to document the lost city, although several different explorers said that they saw it in 1993 and 1998. It's apparently located near a giant sinkhole in Chisur, an isolated waterhole in the middle of a sandy wasteland. This city has been called the Atlantis of the Sands for how mysterious it is. Arab historians don't think it ever existed and believe the name Ubar simply refers to the desert region. However, there's no denying that archaeological sites have been discovered in the desert here. In 2007, excavations near the sinkhole revealed the ruins of a fortress, as well as artifacts from Persia, Rome, and Greece. Clearly, the area was much more active about 2,000 years ago. There must have been a city somewhere, but no researcher can actually locate it for the life of them. We don't even know who could have built it. Etzanoa. The lost city of Etzanoa was rediscovered in June of 2015 by the archaeologist Don Blakesley and his team of researchers. They identified what they believe to be the entire region that Etzanoa once encompassed in Kansas. If you've never heard of Etzanoa before, you're not alone. When Spanish explorers entered what is now Kansas in 1601, they claimed to come across a great settlement. But nobody took much interest until the 1930s, when excavations began in places around Arkansas City. Archaeologists found plenty of ancient sites that were once populated by the Wichita indigenous people. However, they concluded that these were individual towns and villages, not one massive city. But they were wrong. Underneath what is now Arkansas City and spreading for miles to the north was Etzanoa, one of the biggest cities in North America before Europeans arrived. It was populated by around 20,000 ancestral Wichita. What archaeologists mistook for single settlements were actually clusters of houses, kind of like what we think of as suburbs. Had the Europeans never arrived and the Spanish never shown up and started massacring everyone, this very well could have turned into the biggest city in North America. At the time, it rivaled even the great Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan in Mexico City. The Turquoise Mountain. The minaret of Jam is the very last piece of architecture still standing within the lost city of Turquoise Mountain. It's a tower that was built in the 12th century in Afghanistan, standing over 180 feet above the valley below. The tower was once a shining monument in the Turquoise Mountain, the legendary lost capital of Afghanistan in the Middle Ages. This was back when the country was ruled by the Ghurid Empire, during a time when Jews, Christians, and Muslims lived in the same city in relative harmony. Historians believe it wasn't until the destruction and subsequent vanishing of the city that the practitioners of these religions became divided, squabbling enemies. At least this is what the evidence tells us. Turquoise Mountain was supposedly a multicultural center and a prospering city. It was home to a Jewish trading community, as is evident by the inscriptions left behind on tombstones discovered in the 1950s. It thrived up until the early part of the 1220s, when the son of Genghis Khan, Ogedei Khan, showed up and trashed the place. Like I said before, the tower is the only thing left. If not for this single spire reaching for the sky, you wouldn't even know an ancient city once stood here. There's nothing else left. And when the tower falls, that will be the last vestige of the last city of the Ghurid Empire gone. The Invisible City. Here's something you probably never expected to hear. In the video game franchise Tomb Raider, Lara Croft goes searching for the lost mythical city of Kites. It's a major plot in some of the games from the franchise. But the truth is that the mythical city may actually have been a real place. It might be lost underneath the water of Russia's Lake Svetloyar. Archaeologists in 2011 discovered objects underneath the water here, which they believe were lost when the city sank. The legend of the city goes back to the early part of the 13th century. Little Kitez was founded by the Grand Prince of Vladimir, Prince Georgy, in what is now the Nizhny Novgorod Oblast of Russia. This is a very real place that has survived over 700 years and is still standing today. But a little way off, the prince allegedly found a beautiful place where he wanted to make a new city. That became Big Kitez. It was considered a holy place. Monasteries and churches were built in the dozens, but its exact location was a secret to outsiders. When Batu Khan and the Golden Horde showed up in 1238, they destroyed Little Kitez and went looking for Big Kitez. They discovered it, but then something strange happened. The Mongolians were shocked because there were no walls, no army, and nothing to stop them from taking the place over. All they saw were the citizens gathered together and praying. Then water started squirting out of the lake. There was a great rumble, and the city sank right before their eyes. At least this is the myth. Now that researchers have actually found archaeological traces of the city at the bottom of the lake, it looks like there could be some truth to it. The city definitely didn't descend into the water on its own, but could have been submerged as the result of a sudden earthquake. Ganja Nagara. Ganja Nagara is the mythical lost city of a Malay Indian kingdom that once ruled a large part of Malaysia in the 2nd century. Researchers believe the kingdom collapsed after it was attacked by King Rajendra Chola I of South India, sometime around 1025. However, no trace of the city has ever been found. It was likely the Ganja Nagara kingdom who built the city, active between 100 and 1000 AD. And yes, these people named their great city after themselves. Why not? They probably arrived in the region as Hindu traders, part of a group who built colonies all throughout Southeast Asia, in places like Cambodia, Thailand, and Sri Lanka. One legend even says the founder was a direct descendant of Alexander the Great. Maybe that's why they managed to get themselves a much larger piece of the pie than the rest of the colonies, taking over Malaysia and trading with faraway lands. Sadly, there is very little archaeological evidence of these people. There are artifacts, but they are spread across Malaysia and don't indicate a single capital being in any particular spot. It definitely existed, but all traces of Ganja Nagara are long gone. Thanks for watching! Which lost city would you like to see in its former glory? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. See you soon for more archaeological videos. Bye!